Magnus Carlsen is a master of piece activity and square domination. In this game against Grandmaster Jumabai Renath, he completely takes over the light squares, leaving his opponent with little counterplay. And how he manages the game after that? Let's take a look. So Magnus Carlsen has black pieces and his opponent is Grandmaster Jumabai Renath. So Jumabai starts with e4. Magnus Carlsen goes for the Sicilian, knight f3, e6, and in this position, instead of going for d4, Jumabai goes for Sicilian c3, the Alpine variation. Now, Magnus Carlsen goes for d5. So, a more common reply in this position is e takes d5 followed by d4, but then Jumabai plays the move e5. So, in this position, there are certain options for black. One of them is to play d4, stop white's d4 idea, and then play. Or another idea is just to play knight c6, allow white to get d4 and get into the French defense structures. So Magnus Carlsen decides to go for knight c6, allow Jumabai to play a d4 and then get into the French defense pawn structures. So then Magnus plays the move bishop d7, then bishop e2 is played. He captures, then he plays knight e7 because in this position he needs to develop the knight and the bishop to castle. So if he plays bishop e7, then the only option for the knight is to go to h6, and in some cases bishop takes h6 can be there. So he's like, all right, let me develop the knight over here, then I can put it on f5 and then develop my bishop and then castle. So he plays bishop e7, then castle is played, then castle, bishop d3 is played. Now his development is completed, but the thing is that his pieces are a bit restricted. So Magnus challenges Jumabai center with the move f6. Then Jumabai plays the move rook e1. He's like, let's improve the rook's position. Then Magnus plays f takes e5, knight takes e5. So in this position, by the way, this pawn is not falling because there is knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen takes d4. And then white has recovered the pawn and Magnus's king side has gotten a bit weaker, and these are nice blockaders as well. So that's one of the options that white has. So another option white can have is this, and then directly playing queen h5, putting pressure on this one. h6, then bishop h6, because g takes h6 has this queen g6 check idea, and then there will be mate next. If something like g6 is played, then also bishop g6, and Magnus's king side is too weak. So that's why that center pawn should not be taken. So Magnus plays knight takes e5 in this position. Jumabai goes for rook takes e5. Then Magnus improves the bishop's position. Bishop d6. Jumabai goes rook e2 because Magnus has control of the semi-open file. There can be some pressure on the f2 pawn. So he is bringing the rook to e2 to keep an eye on it. Magnus improves the queen's position. b3 gets played. Now Magnus improves the rook's position because that rook was not doing much. Now Jumabai plays the move bishop takes f5. So what is his plan? So in this position, Magnus plays move e takes f5. He has gotten the double bishop advantage. He might have ideas of playing f4, f3 as well. So why did Jumabai do this? So he had a very specific plan. He wanted to play bishop a3 in this position. So now let's go back. So in this position, if he had played bishop a3 directly, then the problem in this case would be there is this nice tactic rook into c2. And then there is this, and if bishop into d6, then there is rook into e. And if one of them captures, then knight takes d6. Jumabai is down a piece. If this, then also there can be some ideas. For example, here there is this very nice plan of knight takes d4, pressure on here. And if bishop takes e2, then there is knight takes e2. If king f1 or something, then there is bishop b5. Things are looking quite bad. So that's why bishop a3 directly was not possible. So Jumabai first played bishop takes f5, he takes f5, and then he's like, now I can play bishop a3. But so what is the main objective of this? The main objective of this is that once the bishop gets exchanged, then Magnus will be left with this restricted bishop. This outpost square is there for Jumabai to bring his knight or the rook, the queen, and then he will get some activity. But in this position, Magnus played the move rook takes c2. So he's like, all right, if you take this, then I'll take it and then I'll have two minor pieces. But Jumabayev had seen further. He played the move bishop takes d6, and since the knight is not there, so there won't be this knight takes d4 idea at some point. So, and then Magnus played rook takes e2. Jumabayev played bishop takes f8. Of course, this bishop cannot be captured because this rook is hanging. So, then Magnus improved the bishop's position. He's like, all right, I will just defend the rook. Now, Jumabayev played bishop b4. So, yes, Magnus actually has the rook on the second rank, but the problem in this position is that the pawn structure is quite symmetrical, and more importantly, it's opposite color bishops. So if, say, for example, queens are exchanged or the rooks are exchanged, then it might get quite difficult for Magnus to convert this into a win. But how he does it, so in this position, to keep the pressure on Jumabayev is something quite instructive. Now, before we see the rest of the game, I want to discuss something with you. So, a new feature, courses, are soon coming to chessneurons.com. It will be complete training programs on different areas of chess. It will be a cleared, structured way for you to improve. So, stay tuned. Courses are soon coming on chessneurons.com. So, let's get back to the game. Now, in this position, Magnus Carlsen played the move queen h4. He's like, all right, before Jumabayev was able to play maybe rook c1, rook c2, or maybe create activity through the c file, or try to exchange the queens, let me increase the pressure on the king side in this position. So he plays the move queen h4. Now, if g3 is played, that's not a good move, because Magnus would say, for example, play queen e4. And the problem is the light squares have gotten extremely weak, and Jumabayev has the dark square bishop while Magnus has the light square bishop. So that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to provoke Jumabayev to play g3, but Jumabayev also knows it. So he plays the move bishop e1. He's like, yes, my bishop is passive, but I'm not going to push this pawn because it's controlling these light squares. So I'll keep it there. So Magnus is like, all right, no worries. I'll centralize my queen. Now the problem with moves like f3 is that there can be this queen e3 type of ideas, and the pressure on the king side would increase. So in this position, Jumabayev played the move a4. He's like, all right, I'll try to harass the bishop. No worries. Magnus Carlsen improved the bishop's position. So, by the way, in this position, an important note that the move rook c1 is not possible because there is bishop c2 and the queen is actually trapped. So only rook takes c2 is possible, and of course, then rook e1 would soon be made. Rook c1 is not possible. Jumabayev played queen c1. He's like, all right, I'll bring the queen on the open file and do something. Magnus Carlsen is not worried. He's like, all right, you're trying to target my king. I'll just play simple move h6. And if queen c8 is played, I'm not worried. I'll just tuck the king in on h7, and then I'll keep the focus on the king side. And then Jumabayev plays the move bishop c3. He's like, all right, now that the king will get on h7, I can't do much, so I don't want to give up this pawn. Then he played the move bishop c3. So now, Magnus. So, queen is active, bishop is active, rook is active. So, he needs to put more pressure on Jumabayev. So, he makes use of the pawn. He plays the move f4. What's the idea? Quite simple. f3, and then weakening the light squares, because if g3 is played, then there can be such ideas. And if g takes f3, then of course queen takes f3, the king side gets extremely weak. There can be bishop e4 ideas as well. So that's the point. But now it seems like, all right, what if Jumabayev plays the move f3? So what has happened because of f4? This queen has got this diagonal, and the queen can actually get to g6. And then there is pressure on g2. And if queen f1 is played in this position, then rook c2, the position collapses. So for that reason, Jumabayev played the move bishop b4. He's like, all right, you take my pawn, and then I'll do something. But Magnus Carlsen is like, no, I don't want to go after the pawn. Now I'm going after your king side. I want to weaken the light square there. I want to remove that g2 pawn. So then Jumabayev, of course, recognizes if he pushes it, then there can be these type of ideas. Or if g3, then there can be rook f2 as well, because king f2, queen e2, queen g2 mate will be there. So it's things are just really bad for him. So he played the move bishop d6. He's like, all right, you play f takes g2. You have won a pawn, but I will put my bishop on g3. It's defending. Yes, it's defending, but it's only defending the dark squares and this pawn is there. And now the problems are just ever increasing for Jumabayev. And then Magnus, in his trademark style, he's not in a rush. He's like, all right, I'll just put my king on h7, so no unpleasant checks or anything like that can happen. Now Jumabayev plays the move h3. So his idea is that at some point he might be able to shift the king over here. Magnus plays the move queen f3 in this position. Then one of the ideas could be in some lines, maybe this, and then try to do it. So it depends on Jumabayev's response, but there are quite a few ideas that Magnus can go after. So Jumabayev plays the move queen d1, bishop c2 gets played. He brings the bishop back to e4. Once again, not in any rush. Queen c7 is played. He plays the move rook d2. And then in this position, once again, queen c1 is played, but now it takes this central pawn. And then two pawns are not there for white. And now after moving the rook, this pawn can also be pushed. There's some pressure over here as well. The king side is already extremely weak, and white doesn't have much counterplay chances. And Jumabayev resigned in this position. So an extremely instructive game of Magnus Carlsen on, say, for example, from here, how he increased the pressure on the king side, how he improved the pieces, and how he made use of the pawn to weaken those light squares of Jumabayev and then win the game in an extremely instructive manner. Thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.